Hi, I'm Corey Gilmore, and this is Adapt to Technology Today, Show 1. And today's show is WWDC Thoughts and Reactions. Well, first of all, we need to talk about iOS 8. Now, Apple does this every year. They do their big jump to whatever version of iOS they're putting out. And it's always the best release ever. As if they're going to say that the previous one... As if they're going to say that, oh, I'm sorry, this is the crappiest release ever, but here you go. They're not going to do that. But in this case, there is a lot for people with disabilities. First, I want to talk a little bit about continuity. Continuity is the idea that I own a Mac and I can start working on my Mac. My phone will know what I'm working on, and if I slide up on my phone or my iPad, I can pick right up with what I was working on. I don't have to launch all kinds of apps and go into specific files. It just knows. And for me, that's amazing because first of all, 90% of what I do on a computer has to be done by either by touch or by voice. I don't type. I have CP, so I don't type. I use a mouse when I have to, but I prefer to touch things and make them the correct size because I also have a vision problem, so being able to start on my Mac and then work on my iDevices is incredible. You know, they're expanding what iCloud can do, so that's what we're going to talk about next. Now, for those of you who don't know, iCloud is Apple's online storage system. It's kind of like Google Drive. Don't tell them I said that. But the idea is you don't save things on your iPad or your iPhone. You save them to iCloud, and then iCloud knows that you've saved it, so whatever device you go to, you can pick right up, pick the file back up and start working. Well, they're expanding that, and they're adding iCloud everywhere, into macOS, into iOS, and it won't be just in applications now. It'll be throughout the whole operating system. Everything can go to iCloud. So this means that this goes back to what I was saying before. This is how the system will know what you're doing and be able to switch between your Mac and your iDevice seamlessly. You might ask what this has to do with disabilities. Turns out I'm also an artist. So I paint and draw, and I do a lot of photography. And one thing I had trouble doing is taking the little memory card out of the camera, plugging it into, whatever device I want to use and editing those photos. Because which device are they on? Are they on my computer? Are they on my tablet? What are they on? So iCloud Photos means I'm going to store all my photos up there. So whatever device I'm on, which will probably be my iPad, it means I can edit them right there, and I don't have to go, gee, those are on my computer. And that's the promise of iCloud, is that you can have everything everywhere. And they're just expanding that and making that, kind of bringing that to reality, because they started that way back when iCloud was introduced, but we've taken baby steps, and now we're doing it right at the guts of iOS and Mac OS. So that's a big deal. That's gonna change everything. So that's one thing we learned in iOS 8. The huge thing, the thing I haven't mentioned is Apple did announce its own home automation platform. So I'll see if I can give an example, see if I can get this close to the camera. On my phone, I have an application. Let's see if I can pull this out. And this application is for controlling the light in my bedroom. And this is it's not a smartphone type of light. What happens is that this app communicates with a device that's connected to my Mac and sends a signal to the light, and it turns on and off and dims and all that. Home automation right now is tricky. It's very, very tricky because every device that you buy has its own protocol. A protocol, for those who don't know, is a way of communicating. And so they all have their own kind of signals and their own apps. It's just a pain in the butt. And what we want, so what we want really is to be able to talk to Siri and say, turn on my lights and, set the temperature at this temperature or that temperature. We don't want to have to think about how things work and connecting them up and making sure they all talk together. So Apple has announced that they are providing a framework. So they're gonna worry about how all the devices talk to each other, and so then we can just tell Siri what it is we want. And this is huge, huge, because it means we can have televisions that are iOS compatible. We can say, Siri, turn on the TV, because Siri knows where the TV is and can deal with all the logistics of how it all works. So I'm just thrilled because Apple is big, and there's a lot of companies that do home automation, and they all do it their own way. And the job of software, first of all, you typically have to have some kind of computer, whether that's a PC or a Mac. You have to have a computer to deal with all the hardware devices. And try to communicate with all those devices. So the promise of this is instead of getting like instead of getting a special light switch, I could just buy a light bulb that's iOS aware. And so suddenly I have my iPhone and a light bulb. And I can control a light, or like, and that's just amazing the fact that it could be that simple. Because when things get to be simple, then people start doing it. If it's got the whole reason, and we've been able to do home automation for years, and the whole reason it hasn't taken off is it's complicated. It's hard. There's historically been wiring that you have to do, because even if you don't have to wire each device in, like a lamp module or whatever, those are easy to do. But then you have to connect it all to this PC, and this PC has to have cable running throughout the house so that in every room you can, talk to the PC. And it can cost thousands of dollars, and it's a pain in the butt. So if Apple does all of this, and they deal with it all I need is my iPhone or iPad, and I can deal with that, you know. And yes, I know that Google will have a response, and I will do. By the way, Google is on my radar. So next week when we do Google I/O, you'll get another podcast about what they announced, because they're the ones doing self-driving cars. Okay, they they're going to revitalize the space program. So plenty to talk about there. So don't be thinking, oh, he's going off on Apple and going nuts. No, you know, as I mentioned last week, I'm kind of upset that we're at OS 10, 10.10. I don't know why we're not on 11, or where Siri is on the desktop. I don't understand that. They made a big thing about continuity, which is the idea that I can work on whatever device I want. But when they were doing that, I just wanted to scream out, yeah, but you took out my user interface for that is here. I don't really have touch on the desktop. I don't really have Siri on the desktop. So exactly how am I supposed to work on my computer? Actually, the reason I have a Mac has to do with the fact that when you use a Mac, you can run Windows, you can run Mac OS, and the fact that slowly everything's becoming integrated. So one day we'll have an iPad that runs Mac apps, and everything will be fine. But for me, the keyboard and mouse should have died a long time ago. So when we discuss Windows 8 down the road, you'll hear what I think about that. But I was really disappointed that Apple, didn't put Siri into the new Mac OS. They are wonderful people, and all these companies are full of brilliant guys. They're absolutely brilliant guys. Google's got brilliant guys. Microsoft now has a leader who says, let's do stuff for iOS. Let's do this. Let's do that. But they never seem to go far enough. It's like You have this wonderful thing, and granted, it's not perfect, but get it over to the desktop, and you'll see that it'll start to get better. But you know, I'm happy for what they did do. Um, there's a lot of gaming stuff in iOS 8, and in the new Mac OS, the they developed a common programming language for those two things. So we are going to start to see them merge more, I think. And maybe when there's a nice hybrid of those things, maybe we'll go to 11. I really, really hope that happens. Um, but, I mean, we're getting home automation, so Star Trek, is becoming kind of a reality. So I guess there's a crumb there for people with disabilities. But I was really looking forward to, having the same virtual assistant that I have here. And one of the reasons why is I use speech recognition on all my computers. Um, and, and for speech recognition to be good, for it to really know um, anything about you, you have to train it and make corrections. And Siri is no different, but Siri has an advantage. And Google Now has an advantage. They actually have the same advantage. And the advantage is, if you use Siri on one device and you make corrections on it, those speech files are stored up in Apple's cloud or in Google's cloud or where whoever company you choose. Um, and so every time you make corrections on one device, that impacts the recognition, say on your iPad or your Mac. And so that's awesome. It's just amazing to see that. Because typically, I run Dragon products, and every instance of Dragon, I had Dragon on my desktop, I used to have a laptop, and I had to train those separately. I had to maintain them separately. It was a royal pain in the butt. So, in that regard, the digital assistants are much better. But if Apple's listening, I would really love for them to do it. This is the home automation platform. When I can say to Siri, schedule my meeting, uh, make my coffee, and oh, by the way, while I'm drinking my coffee, can you send this email? That means I've done more in 10 minutes to be productive than I could possibly do all day. I need help for everything. So the more we can get these things to do, the states can't take away my iPhone. They can't take away my iPad and my Wi-Fi. Oh, that reminds me. One more feature in iOS to discuss, which is, we talked about continuity, and one of the continuity things is, at home, I have this laying down, and I carry my iPad with me. And I can be dictating an email on my iPad or whatever, and my phone is stored somewhere, and I don't have it with me, but I'm getting a phone call. And because my devices under iOS 8 will know what each other is doing, I get caller ID either on my Mac or on my iPad, and I can just tap the button and use those devices, like my Mac or my iPad, as speakerphones. And if I want to make a phone call, I just go into my contacts, tap the number, and make a speakerphone call. Now I know I'm boring because I actually use the phone. I know that amazes people because we do everything by text and this and that. Um, but sometimes a phone, when you have a disability, sometimes a phone call is the quickest thing. So if you can make, and I've always said, why don't they have a speakerphone in the iPad? So now there's a speakerphone in whatever Apple device I want to use. So when the watch comes, and it may come, but when the watch comes, we can make those calls. So maybe that becomes something that's more useful. It was just interesting to see. You know. Um, so that was WWDC in a nutshell. I will be testing these things, and as soon as I can talk about these things publicly, I will. But don't expect me to break my NDA um, when when testing for Apple gives me the opportunity to give them feedback. Which reminds me, one thing you can do. Yes, you, the audience, can do something. This summer, Apple is going to have a public beta program. You can sign up. You don't need to be a developer. You can sign up. You can give feedback. So rather than saying, oh, this doesn't work for people with disabilities, get on there and tell them what you need. They really do want to know. Otherwise, they wouldn't do a public beta. They really do care. And the thing about all these products, regardless of what company you like, is that they're on a certain roadmap and they're aware of things like Siri. They're aware of this being important. So it's on the roadmap. And what happens is they put things in as they complete them. So if it doesn't get in this version of macOS, it might get in the next one or the one after that. So if you think it's important, and I know there are people who think Siri's terrible and blah blah, that's fine. There's all kinds of other technology. It's fine. Use what you can. Use what works. But if you think that speech is important, tell Apple. Let them know. Be specific. Don't just say, this is terrible. Say, this is what I needed to do. This is why I needed to do it. Because these things will make a difference, I promise. Okay? So let's all work together and give the operating system we want out of both Apple and Google. And maybe someday they'll play nicely together. It can happen. I mean, Windows runs on a Mac, and we never thought we'd see that either. So there you go. So that's the show for today, and remember to subscribe. And we'll be doing Google I/O next week, and you can hear what I think about Android, because I do think about Android. I'm not a hater. There are certain things I hate, but we'll leave those for next week. And before I go, I just want to thank the Twit team for their inspiration and say good night, Leo Laporte, wherever you are.